Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good afternoon, everyone. Has everybody received a copy of the handouts? Okay, over the past few weeks, I've been explaining one of the discourses of the Buddha contained in the Sutta Nipata, which is a collection of the Buddha's discourses. The sutta that I've been explaining is called the Mangala Sutta. And this is a sutta which gives, we call it, a progressive, step-by-step explanation of what we might call the ideal course of life, going all the ways from the most elementary stages, bringing oneself through stages of maturity, and then leading into the higher spiritual practices aimed at realization and liberation. The sutta begins when a deva, this is a deity, a being from one of the heavenly realms, comes before the Buddha and asks the question, what is the meaning of true blessings? What is truly auspicious, the true source of blessings? And then the Buddha begins the series of verses as his answer. He begins with a verse which lays down what I call the proper orientation. These are the conditions for developing discretion. Then comes a verse which is concerned with establishing secure foundations for a wholesome life. Then comes a verse which is concerned with preparing oneself for success in life. Success according to the standards of wholesome success. Okay, so these three verses, verses 2 to 4, all serve a preparatory function. Now the next two verses are concerned with what I would call leading a virtuous life in the world. This is fulfilling one's mundane responsibilities, family responsibilities, as well as social and civil responsibilities. In past weeks, I've explained verses 2, 3, and 4, and in today's talk, I come to verse number 5, and if time permits, I will go on to verse number 6. For those who have a copy of the translation and are following along with the translation, we're on page 29. I recite first from the Pali, then I give translation, then explanation. Mata pitu upatanang Putta darasa sangaho anakula chakamanta etang mangalamuttamang. Okay, the meaning of this: supporting one's father and mother, cherishing wife and children, and a peaceful occupation, or better, a harmless occupation, this is the most auspicious performance or in a preferred translation, this is the highest or greatest blessing. And I think these verses are very important because many people who learn about Buddhism think Buddhism is concerned only with enlightenment, only with liberation, only with nirvana. And so they think Buddhism is a very beautiful teaching, very noble and lofty teaching, but completely otherworldly teaching that has nothing of relevance to people living in the world. But one gets that impression only if one reads Buddha's texts selectively. We have to remember that the Buddha didn't teach only monks and nuns, but he wandered around through the towns and villages of Northeast India, teaching people from all walks of life. And most of the people who heard his discourses were lay people. And so the Buddha would always attune his discourses to the needs, the requirements, the situations of the people he was teaching. He would always try to lead them further, not just let people remain complacently content with their situation. He would always give them a vision of the ultimate goal, but he would give people advice, guidance that would be appropriate to the conditions under which they were living. And so for those who are living lives of social, engaged in society, people who don't choose the course of renunciation, the Buddha gives advice to help them lead wholesome, virtuous lives in the world, lives that will conduce to their fulfillment of their various responsibilities and also enable them to gradually develop the higher qualities that will mature in the faculties necessary to reach enlightenment. And so the Buddha teaches again and again that for those living within the situation of the family, one of the most important obligations is to respect and look after one's parents. In fact, the Buddha says, any wholesome religious teaching made known in the world will teach three things. One of these is the value of generosity. Another is the value of renunciation. And the third is the importance of respecting one's mother and father. Elsewhere, the Buddha says that there are two people that one can never repay. That is one's mother and father. He says that if you were to take your mother on one shoulder, your father on another shoulder, and carry them around, feed them, bathe them, nurse them when they're ill, clean their bodies, still one would not be fulfilling one's gratitude, one will not be fulfilling one's debt to one's parents. The reason for this is because, first of all, it is our parents who give us life. And then when we are born, it's our parents who introduce us to the world. Our parents, when we're little, helpless, our parents take care of us. They feed us, clean us, and they sacrifice themselves in so many ways for our benefit. Our father will go to work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, not so much for his own good, but for the benefit of his children. Our mothers, if we get ill, she will not stop until she has found a doctor or medicines to help us get well. And so we have this immense, immeasurable debt of gratitude to our parents. And then the Buddha mentions how we can at least attempt to repay this debt of gratitude that we owe to our parents. First, he speaks about the mundane aspect. And he mentions, in this discourse, he mentions 5 ways to try to repay this debt to one's parents. First, when one's parents are growing old and can no longer look after themselves, then one should look after them. Of course, if one is living at a distance from them, if one has a brother or sister who is doing that, then one doesn't feel that one has to stay with one's parents to do that. But if one's parents have nobody else to look after them, then one should do so oneself. Then one should, if they have started any good work for society, then one should try to perpetuate that good work. One should not let their good projects come to an end, but to the best of one's ability, one should continue it. And by one's own behavior, one should keep up the good name, the good reputation of one's family. Because people often judge the parents by the behavior of the children. When you see a properly behaved person, one thinks this person has had a good upbringing. That person must have had good parents. And so from the child, one judges the parents. But if one sees a wild, unruly, impolite, undisciplined, boisterous person, then one thinks this person was not brought up properly. And that gives a bad impression of the parents. Then when the parents pass their inheritance on to their children, the family wealth, one should use it in a responsible way, not just squander it for one's own enjoyments, or recklessly speculate with that wealth or gamble it away, but use it in a responsible way, a way that will ensure that that wealth will be preserved, even increased, so it can be passed on to later generations. And then when one's parents pass away, this is very important. Usually we who survive them, we feel helpless, like we want to do something to benefit the parents. We don't know what can we do to help them. And if we don't see that we have any outlet, then we just become overwhelmed with grief. But the Buddha taught that there is something very, very important that we can do, very definite, very valuable to help the parents. And this is performing meritorious deeds in their name and then sharing the merit with them, dedicating the merit to them. Because there are other realms of existence. And if our parents have opened certain realms, they cannot do any meritorious deeds on their own, but they still have this strong connection with us, their children. And they are dependent upon us for their welfare in their new existence. So the way we can help them is we do meritorious deeds. Intentionally, we form the volition, the determination, I'm going to do this meritorious deed in the name of my parents. One does the deed, and then one thinks of one's parents, and almost as an act of meditation, one offers to share that merit with them, expressing the hope, the wish that the merits of one's deeds will also be rejoiced in by one's own parents. And if they have been reborn in certain of these realms, they can witness what we are doing. And if they witness it, they can rejoice in these deeds, and they will participate in the meritorious act. If the parents have been reborn as human beings, they can't rejoice. They can't participate. If they've been reborn in the animal realm, they can't participate. But there are certain other realms, the lower deva realms, the realms of the pretas, or what they call the hungry ghosts. In those realms, if the parents have been reborn in those realms, they need our help. And the way we can help them is by doing these meritorious deeds and sharing it with the parents. Okay, that takes care of the mundane aspect. The spiritual aspect, how we can repay the debt of gratitude to our parents. The Buddha says, if our parents don't have confidence or trust in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we inspire confidence in their minds. We generate faith in their minds. We lead them to have faith in the triple gem. If our parents are not leading morally upright life, we teach them the importance of leading an ethical life. If our parents don't practice generosity, we explain to them the benefits of generosity and try to induce them to practice charity. And if our parents don't have knowledge of the Dhamma, we try to help them to learn about the Dhamma, the Buddha's teaching. And if our parents don't have wisdom, we try to help them gain wisdom, to gain understanding of the Dhamma. And the Buddha says one who helps his parents gain these 5 things, faith, moral discipline, generosity, knowledge of the Dhamma, and wisdom, that person does more than repay his parents. Okay, that sometimes happens in the West. This is a problem. People who grow up in Asia often find it difficult to understand this. But it's a real problem in the West that sometimes people have abusive parents. Parents who treat them harshly, who beat them a lot, treat them cruelly. And so when they hear about this importance of filial piety, of repaying the debt of gratitude to the parents, they have trouble understanding this and wonder, how can we feel this gratitude to our parents when we've suffered so much under them? The way to overcome this is to try to think of our parents with gratitude for whatever good they have done to us. Even if they've treated us harshly in many ways, still try to think of some ways in which they've benefited us. Even when we were very little, still they looked after our well-being. Even though they might have been treated us roughly 90% of the time, sometimes 10% of the time they might have been gentle and kind to us. And then when we think about the bad ways in which they treated us, we should try to feel compassion for them and recognize that they were behaving this way because of certain difficulties that they were undergoing themselves, because of certain deep problems that were brewing within their own minds. We have to remember that they too were human beings with problems of their own, and due to their own ignorance, the force of the defilements or afflictions in their own mind, they had to release their tensions and their frustrations on us. And so when we think of this, then we try to generate a thought of forgiveness towards them and a wish for their true welfare. Okay, this explains supporting one's mother and father. Now I come to the second blessing within this verse. Puta darasa sangaho, which means maintaining a wife and children, or from the woman's point of view, maintaining a husband and children. And first I should say a few words about the Buddhist view of marriage. Buddhism doesn't view marriage as a sacred act, as a sacrament in any way, but purely as a civil function. And so in Buddhist societies, Buddhist monks do not perform the marriage ceremonies. The marriage ceremony is performed purely as a civil ceremony by lay officials. But when a couple is married, they will usually, after the marriage ceremony, they will go to the Buddhist temple or monastery to receive blessings from the monks, or to receive a short discourse giving advice on how to lead a proper married life. And Buddhism doesn't regard marriage as obligatory for everybody. Rather, it sees that the higher life is the life of renunciation, the life of celibacy. The Buddha himself had been married when he was living as a prince, and he left the married life in order to become a wandering ascetic. And in Buddhist countries, Buddhist societies, monastics, monks and nuns serve in a way as models and guides for the lay community. And so this sets a certain standard whereby the life of celibacy, the life of renunciation, serves as the ideal towards which all Buddhist followers should be aspiring, even though many will not be capable of achieving that within this lifetime. Within marriage, marital relations are guided by the shared recognition that marriage should not be an opportunity merely for enjoying sensual pleasures and for raising a family, but rather that marriage also presents challenges and opportunities for spiritual growth. Since the Buddhist ideal is one of selflessness, of renouncing craving, attachment, overcoming greed, hatred, and ignorance, within a Buddhist marriage, the married couple will try to help each other in this task of reducing greed, hatred, and ignorance. The Buddha says that the ideal marriage is one in which both husband and wife have faith in the triple gem, in which the husband and wife both observe the 5 precepts, are both practicing generosity, and are both trying to cultivate the wisdom that penetrates the truth of the Buddha's Dharma. Within Buddhist societies and Buddhist countries, this is what I've heard, that many married couples, after they have brought up their children, when they reach maybe their 40s, 50s, then they will decide to adopt the life of celibacy. They still remain married, they don't become ordained as monk and nun, but they decide to desist from further sexual relations. And so they become brahmacharis, livers of the spiritual life. Okay, within the framework of Buddhist obligations, the Buddha has spoken of 5 duties of a husband towards his wife. He says that the husband should always be courteous to his wife. He should show her respect. He should always be faithful to her. He should give her authority in managing the affairs of the home. And also, the fifth duty is that he should from time to time give her gifts of clothing or jewelry. And the wife also has 5 duties towards the husband. She should see to the proper care of the household, managing everything very properly. She should be cordial to her in-laws. And this is because the Buddha is teaching in an Indian society in which when a woman is married, she goes to live with the parents and other relations of the husband. And so she has to treat her husband's parents politely and respectfully. Further, the wife should always be faithful to the husband. Then the wife, because the husband entrusts the wealth that he earns, he entrusts to the wife. So the wife should take good care of the family wealth. That is her responsibility. And then fifth, she should be skillful and diligent and in fulfilling her various duties in the household. If the Buddha was teaching today, he would have to take account of the fact that in many households today, both husband and wife are working on the outside. No doubt there would be some difference in formulation. Okay, now this verse says, maintaining a wife or husband and children. So that brings us to the area of the way parents should bring up children. This is another point in which the Buddha has laid a great deal of importance, because it is the parents that transmit to the children the values that sustain a society. And so in this way, the family becomes that particular unit within society by which the values of a society are transmitted from generation to generation. The family, you could say, is the first educational institution for each new generation. And so it's extremely important, according to the Buddha's teaching, for the parents to bring up their children properly. I spoke earlier in explaining the first verse of this sutta about the need to develop what we call the sense of discretion, the ability to discriminate between right and wrong, good and bad. And that sense of discretion is first acquired through our contact with our parents. And it is the parents that nurture within the newborn child that sense of discretion. So if the parents are very casual in the way they bring up their children and don't fulfill that obligation to implant in them that sense of discretion, then the children can grow up to be morally reckless people who can just have completely destructive impact upon society. Whereas if the parents cultivate that sense of discretion in the children, then the children can grow up and become a blessing to society. Okay, so the Buddha speaks of 5 duties that parents have towards their children. Just is to restrain them from evil, to explain to them what is wrong, and to explain to them the reasons why certain actions are wrong. This step has the function of implanting in the child what we call the sense of moral shame and moral dread, the fear of wrongdoing. So the sense of moral shame, one doesn't want to do wrong because one has a sense of self-respect. One learns that it is somewhat destructive to one's own sense of self-respect to do wrong deeds. Through this fear of wrongdoing, one realizes that if one does wrong deeds, there will be unfortunate consequences, and so one restrains oneself from fear of the consequences. Okay, so the first step is restraining them from wrongdoing. The second is to encourage them to do good. And the best way to encourage children to do good is to set a good example oneself. To show the children that you yourself do good. And then actively bring the children along whenever one is doing good deeds. So in a Buddhist country, this is very common. The Buddhist temple is a family gathering place. And whenever there are functions in the Buddhist temple, parents will always bring their children along. So from a very young age, children come to the temple. They go to a Buddhist Sunday school where they're taught the basics of Buddhism. They learn the importance of having respect for the Buddha, the importance of generosity, the importance of developing loving kindness and compassion. And all of these they learn through stories of the past lives of the Buddha, the Jataka stories, the great qualities of the paramis or paramitas are imprinted upon their minds. And this provides the model or the inspiring example that children will follow, will have before their mind's eye when they grow up into adults. Whereas if they're exposed to supermodels, rock stars, violent crime on television, crime programs, violent movies, then when the child grows up to be an adult, it's very high, maybe not probably, very high likelihood that that child can easily turn into a criminal. Okay, a third obligation of the parents is to see that the child is educated. A fourth, stated in the Buddhist texts, is to arrange a proper marriage for the child. That was the custom in India, and even right up into modern times in many Buddhist countries, that was the custom. Today, this would have to be modified, but I would still express my own opinion that it would be important for parents to have some knowledge of the people that the child is associating with, and make sure that the child is associating with good friends, friends who have good personal qualities. And then when the child is romantically connected to a partner, to make sure that that partner seems to be a morally upright individual. So if one's child is going to marry that person, one will have some assurance that it's going to be a fruitful and beneficial marriage. And then when the time comes for when the children have reached the proper age, the age of maturity, then the parents should hand over the inheritance to them. That is the fifth duty that the Buddha mentions. Some other things that I would think are important is for parents to choose I've already indicated this, the right kinds of entertainment for their children. To make sure that the children, now they have computers which have internet access, so parents should keep some eye on the children to find out what kind of programs they are accessing on the internet, what kind of websites, not just let them surf the web at random and choose whatever there comes across. And when children go out at night, keep some kind of tab on where they're going, find out what they're doing. Again, find out who their friends are. Not to spy on them and make them feel uncomfortable, but one should have some way of encouraging the children to choose the right kind of friends, since that will determine the course they take later in their life. And it's important to have at least one communal meal a day where all the members of the family are eating together with no TV on, no loud music playing, and so the members of the family can converse together. That will bring that sense of relationship amongst the members of the family. Okay, then the third, this takes care of raising children. The third blessing within this verse is a harmless occupation, anakula kamanta. And this means, in effect, the same as right livelihood. For someone who chooses to live a life in the world, it's necessary to earn one's living by some type of work. The Buddha uses the phrase when he describes the proper disciple. He says that he earns righteous wealth, righteously gained. So one has to earn one's living according to the principles of right livelihood. And this means that one should avoid wrong livelihood. There are several types of livings explicitly mentioned by the Buddha as wrong livelihood. Again, the Buddha has this penchant for numerical lists, so he mentions 5 kinds of wrong livelihood that are to be avoided. What are these 5 kinds? One is dealing in living beings. That means dealing in slaves, prostitutes, in children forcibly abducted and sold for adoption, which I have to say sadly is a common practice in poorer countries in Asia these days. And also dealing in raising animals and selling them for slaughter. The second is dealing in weapons, whether those weapons are to be used for killing humans or killing animals, for war or for sport. The third is dealing in meat, selling the meat even if one doesn't kill the animal oneself. The fourth is dealing in intoxicants, intoxicating drugs or alcoholic beverages. And the fifth is dealing in poisons. And that would include chemicals that might be used in experiments on animals. There are many other aspects to right livelihood, but I want to move on to the next verse and take it rather briefly. So we come now to verse number 6. Again, I will recite the Pali, then the translation. And then give explanation. Danancha dhammacharyacha nyata kanancha sangaho anavajani kamani etang mang Okay, following the translation of the book, liberality or generosity, dutiful conduct, I prefer righteous conduct, the helping of relatives and blameless actions. This is the most auspicious performance, or this is the greatest blessing. Okay, generosity. I've spoken about this quite a few times, so I don't have to go into detail, but generosity means the practice of giving. And we say in Buddhism that there are two main motives for giving. One is respect, the other is compassion. In traditional Buddhist society, the social order is divided into the community of monastics who don't earn any living of their own through a form of work, remunerative work, and the lay community. And so the monastics depend upon the lay community for their material support. The lay people provide the monastics with their robes, alms food, dwelling place, and medicines. And the monastics in turn give the lay people the gift of the Dhamma. And so we have this relationship, this mutual relationship of mutual support. And so when lay people give gifts to the monastics, that is considered giving out of respect. And then when people give to those who are poor, unfortunate, who are in need of help, that is giving motivated by compassion. And when those who know the Dhamma teach the Dhamma to those who want to listen, that is also a form of giving motivated by compassion. And so the practice of giving is a way of sharing whatever one has, whatever benefits one has oneself with others. And it's a way of turning oneself into a channel of blessings for others. And even though on the surface, by giving, one might be making oneself poorer, but actually, from a deeper angle, by giving, one makes oneself richer, because through giving, one widens or extends the boundaries of the heart, the boundaries of one's sense of identity, till those boundaries expand more and more wider and wider, till they become boundless. Okay, so giving, generosity, then dutiful conduct or righteous conduct is observing the 10 ways of wholesome action, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slanderous speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, and avoiding thoughts of covetousness, ill will, and wrong views. These I've explained several times before, so I won't have to go into detail. Then third is the helping of relatives and friends, benefiting them in any way, particularly in a society we have close relations with certain people, and so we have to help our friends, not just let them fend for themselves. And on the sheet that I gave out, you'll find that the Buddha mentions 5 ways in which a person should help his or her friends, and then 5 ways in which the friends should help the person in return. I won't go over those, but you can just read them on the sheet. And then finally, the last blessing within this verse is called blameless actions. And this, I think, can be understood as just a general term which includes all other types of blameless actions that don't fit into any of the other categories. Okay, so with this I will finish the explanation of verse number 6, and that will bring the discourse for today to a close. I thank you all for your attention, and may the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you. And now we close by sharing the merits with the devas, the deities, and all other beings. Akasata cha bhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata cha bhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata cha bhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavata cham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata cham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata cham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya.
All rise. Bow to the Buddha. Bow to Bhante.
Yeah, we will come back. We'll come back for the discussion. Ship would like to come to see in 20 minutes or half an hour. Okay, we'll come back at 2 o'clock. Take a half an hour break.